Hello and welcome to the conference call. It's straight up and time to start. I'm Sherry Shellenberger and I'm joined today by my colleague and friend Barb Piper. Welcome, Barb. Go ahead and say hi so people know your voice.
Nice to be here.
Many of you have already had the pleasure of hearing Barb speak or even maybe taken some university courses from her. Barb and Mary Sue actually worked together at Mary Sue's first job. I'm going to take us way back here, Barb. As an occupational therapist, Mary Sue's first job as an OT anyway, in the Albuquerque Public Schools, and we've managed to keep in touch and stalk her ever since then in terms of learning and being friends. So I'll tell you a little bit about her background for those of you on the call here. Barb has been involved in public education for 41 years, and I would guess that might mean you've learned a few things here, Barb.
Oh, a few things along the way, I'd say so.
And after receiving her bachelor's in elementary education from University of Maine, she taught general ed in elementary grades in Maine and New York for 4 years, then moved to New Mexico, which we're ever so grateful for here in 1973. In 75, you got your master's degree in special ed from the University of New Mexico here, and started a career in special ed in the Albuquerque Public Schools. And your professional roles have included 24 years as a classroom teacher, working with special needs students across the continuum of services. And I really know it is a large continuum because we've been worked together.
Too.
That's right. And a methods and materials specialist, which is really a great thing that the Albuquerque Public Schools did, where they had very experienced folks being able to come in and support some of the classrooms that had a few more challenges or a few more things to deal with. You've been a teacher trainer, been and are, I'm not burying you here yet, teacher trainer, a clinical supervisor for the university's and the school systems partnership program. You've been have worked with the behavior consultation stuff, easy for me to say, for the last 10 years of your employment with APS, and you've taught as adjunct faculty at the college level at the University of New Mexico, at New Mexico Highlands University, College of Santa Fe, and Santa Fe Community College. And you retired from APS in July of 2011, and totally their loss, but our gain as we get to talk with you and be around you more here. And you're continuing your position as adjunct faculty with the teacher education program and teacher certification with Santa Fe Community College. And I need to brag on you here because in spring of 2011, you were awarded the Adjunct Faculty of the Year Award for Santa Fe Community College. So super congrats on that. I'm glad they can recognize some good work when they see it.
Thank you.
In addition to your college teaching, you're currently an education consultant and offer professional development trainings for lots and lots of educators. So just to set the tone here, literally, we have a little soundbite that my sound folks are going to cue up here, which is a transition song, and we'll see how they do queuing it up. Barb was the one that suggested we include this in our test drive book, so it's only appropriate that we put it here. See if it kicks in here. And one of the things that Barb suggested about that was that we use transition songs as parts of our routine. Here we go. Sounds like it's coming in. All right, well, that sound clip helped my engine. You're probably wondering what the heck's going on, but one of the cool things when we were writing the test drive book and had some of our different wonderful friends that we coerced to help us in reviewing it is that Barb had the same suggestion that, as you know, it's a book and CD, the test drive book and CD. You can check that out on the website if you're not already familiar with it, but is to put in some transition songs on the CD, no words, just music, in different time length increments, so that as teachers you could use those when you have those transition times in the classroom. So do you want to say any more about that at that moment?
Well, two things it does. One is it cues the students into, oh, it's a change. We're going to do something different. It's fun. And one of the ways of changing what's called state of mind is to use music. So as you're looking at doing one activity and then changing to another, whether it's physical, whether it's a cognitive, academic activity, whether it's getting ready for lunch, whether it's the end of the class period, whatever, A little bit of music is a good thing.
Goes a long way. And so we were really excited. We have a couple of different lengths of it on the CD for teachers to use in the classroom, and obviously for our parents too at home, that just kind of go, okay, we're going to put the song on, and by the time the song's done, you should be dressed or you should be ready or whatever, and then you pick your length song you want to do. That one I'm particularly attached to because coming from the Slug family, which many of you may know about me, it kind of helps me get a little bit jazzed and ready to go here. So our goals in terms of our call today, because we have 30 minutes, and gosh knows we could talk on and on, but that won't help you or us. We want to keep it simple as our first goal. That's kind of the first theme. Often when we try to do too many things at once, we get ourselves overwhelmed and then don't end up following through on anything. So we're really going to look at, and I know, Barb, because of our work together, how practical so many of the suggestions you have for us are, that will be easy in terms of keeping it simple. And then really the emphasis on setting children up for success. And oftentimes when we see children having some challenges, falling apart, not doing well, not showing us their best effort, oftentimes we can trace it back to us, and we didn't do enough setup to be able to allow them to show us their best self. So those are kind of two things we'll keep in mind, and obviously Barb and Mary Sue and I all agree on that in lots of the work that we've done over our careers here. So some basic considerations kind of thing. I just want everybody to know that you'll get your email document if you haven't already. Those of you listening to the recording here and aren't with us live at the moment, you'll get the document that shows the links and the references to the resources that we're going to mention. So don't scramble or worry about trying to write a website down, and I won't go through all the wwws and all that kind of stuff. The other thing that I'll remind you is that as we look through on each of these calls, I constantly want to bring up to our awareness the fact that diagnostically our children need different things, especially our kiddos kind of more with attention deficit disorders or whatever. Those kiddos like and thrive on novelty and change. So changing our schedules up, our routines up can be really interesting and good for them. We'll put a link to Sandra Reif's website in your resources list there. Barb and I have both learned from her work for sure, and Mary Sue and I had the pleasure of meeting her and hearing her speak when we were actually involved in a presentation for the New Mexico Association of Elementary School Principals. They were having their annual meeting, and she was one of the speakers, and it was wonderful to listen to her information. So check it out if you'd like on her website when you get that information. Then on the opposite end, we have our kiddos that really need and function best when there's routines and safety and they know what's coming. It's predictable, kind of the sameness, if you will. Those are often our kiddos, not a hard and fast rule, but often our kiddos on the autism spectrum, our kiddos who have anxiety challenges, possibly some obsessive compulsive kinds of challenges. So as we go through, think about lots of the strategies and whether that's going to fit and be a match for the folks that you're thinking about as we go on the call. So I want to dive right in, Barb, and have you talk about some of the things. When you and I were preparing for the call, one of the great things that we talked about, and you use a lot in your university courses, is about the framework of these 4 environment areas for teachers to kind of consider when they're looking at classroom management. So take us through a little on that.
Yeah, teachers never have enough time. And so when you're in the middle of a classroom of whether it's, 6 kids or 60 kids, I'm always looking at ways to help teachers focus and look at things simplistically. Let's make it simple, like Sherry mentioned earlier. So in looking at the classroom, whether it's from a classroom management perspective or just how do I organize my classroom, how do I what important things do I need to remember? What I call them the 4 environmental areas. It's a framework for classroom management. And the 4 areas are the physical environment, literally how do you physically arrange the furniture, where are your windows, where's your access doorways, et cetera, et cetera. The cognitive environment, which is your brain development and your academics and so forth. The social emotional environment, which again is social interaction, working together, relationship building, And then the fourth area, which is the one that I still kind of believe that as teachers, maybe beginning teachers especially, we don't get trained in as well, is the area of sensory environment. So much of Mary Sue, well, all of Mary Sue and Sherry's work, that and information that you may actually have already been in contact with or read about, looking at sensory needs, that all the students in your classroom have different sensory needs. And sometimes things don't go right in the classroom, and it's not because of the physical environment. It's not because of the cognitive academic environment. It's not because of the social emotional environment. It is because of something in the sensory environment. But I think that fourth element is the one part of the framework that, although it's gaining way more attention than it did when I first started 40 years ago.
So the progress is being made. We see the progress is
definitely being made. Definitely. And actually, my experience is once you start talking with teachers and increasing their level of awareness about, okay, you understand the physical, cognitive, social, emotional, but do you understand the sensory and what that can mean and what kind of effect that can have?
Absolutely, and I know you say like a lot of teachers don't get a lot of basic information about it. A lot of therapists don't get. Our curriculums are so stacked in terms of information, and our universities have so much they need people to get through that much of, even for us as therapists, much of this comes in our postgraduate kind of, or post-entry level kind of work and workshops that we go to and all those things. And I know for me as an OT in my background, it's stunning to me how much teachers do manage. And I thought that this framework that you had about these four kinds of ways of looking at it, I mean, literally, like, even in your physical environment, just literally what's the traffic pattern when everybody comes in, right?
Exactly.
And if we have kids poking and pushing at each other, then maybe that has to do with the traffic pattern, right?
Maybe it's as simple as if I move these desks or whatever, arrange furniture a certain way, it might take care of the problem, and that's not a problem.
And so that framework, when you and I were talking about it, I thought it was so important to look at and consider all of those environments. And basically, one of the things, because teachers have so many demands, kind of giving it a wide-angle lens, if you will, with this approach,
right. And one of the things in having done a lot of consulting with teachers over the years, where teachers are like, oh my gosh, this kid is such a challenge, and how do I deal with this behavior, and it's affecting this, and on and on. And what I find is, and I'm sure I did this as a teacher too when I was in the classroom, especially initially, is that you tend to focus in on what's not going right.
Yes, we all are trained for that.
It's like, okay, but all your energy is going toward this little teeny piece of the picture. And so by bringing in the framework, for instance, it's like, okay, that's problematic. Now, let's go back to the framework. Is this an issue? Is this a challenge, whatever the challenge may be, whether it's an individual student or a bunch of students? Is that challenge because of, okay, let's start with physical environment,
gotcha,
cognitive environment, social, emotional, or sensory environment. And I just find it's a useful tool to help simplify and better focus my energies as a teacher or as a consultant to help figure out what do I need to do differently.
And it's I love how you say that, because we focus in on the problem, we don't notice all the stuff that's going right, and then we get ourselves feeling so burned out. So that's a great remembering. There's all these areas, lots is going well, and we have this one thing we're going to try to figure out how to address it. And I think by this framework with the four areas, that a lot of OTs I know are often feeling like, oh, I don't know if my teachers will be receptive to some of the sensory information or whatever. And I've actually found it to be quite the opposite, that on the whole, teachers have been really open to learning how to set their students up to learn more efficiently, as long as we understand all the other things that they're managing. And that's what I really had to learn as an OT, was there is so much that's going on here, and I better be really sure that what I'm asking for to be inserted or whatever is really worth the trade-off of doing it, that it sets the kids up in a way that we want.
And if you think of it as therapists will come in and they'll know exactly what needs to be done, but if a teacher perceives it as one more thing to do, that makes it hard for the teacher. But if, as a therapist or consultant, you help teachers understand, even from the framework perspective, well, this is how you fit it into this aspect, then it just becomes part of what the teacher does, rather than don't give me one more thing to do.
Don't give me one more thing, and then I'm outside of my comfort zone.
Right.
I don't know how to do that. You're the therapist. You should know how to do it, right? And so it's a nice blending, and when we get the chances to have those, it can really be terrific. I mean, I've really found teachers to be incredibly receptive.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's a match for what they see and how they observe their students. So one of the things we talked about is over the last 11 years or so especially, you were noticing some kind of like what they repeat problems that were coming up a lot, and you were being asked to come in and help for.
Right.
Talk to us a little bit about a couple of those.
Well, especially with a focus of looking at the sensory environment, teachers would call and, kids are not getting their work done, or they're interrupting in different ways, either physically or verbally, or a variety of things that really kind of fall under the category of behavior problems.
Right, the dreaded behavior problem
word. You got it. It's like, oh my gosh, and actually looking at looking at the setting, looking at all those aspects of the framework, lots of times it was something that could easily be addressed by, for instance, okay, you've got some student who's not, doing what you expected. They're getting out of their seat. It's independent work time, and all of a sudden they're out of their seat, and you're thinking, wait a minute, this is the time you need to be in your seat. Well, it could be that the student just needs more sensory input, needs to have a chance to move more. So have I included enough movement into my instruction, for instance? Did I let them get up and meet with what we call a pair share, where you go meet with a partner?
Oh, yeah, you talked to me about that. I thought that was so great.
So you have some instruction, and then you have the students that have to respond to each other about something. You do what's called a pair share. They get up, they talk, and they could literally physically get up and go talk to another person across the room who's their partner, and then physically come back and sit down. Well, that could take care of some of their sensory needs without it being an issue, and you just build it into the instruction and the organization of the lesson. Students will tell you if they're sitting too long very easily. They get up, they disturb, they talk. The message is there. All behavior has a message.
That's the truth.
And so our job and challenge is to look at what's the message they're giving us, and then figure out how to deal with that message. And I bring it back to the framework again. Is that message telling me I need to do something different about the physical, the cognitive, the social, emotional, or the sensory environment?
Awesome. That's great. It's a great way to look at it and keep us constantly observing, because the thing I know that you all are so excellent in your work looking at behavior, and for us as therapists is we just are such good, and teachers are such good observers. And so when our parents and the teachers and the therapists are meeting and we got those challenges, get everybody in there, get looking at what it really is, and take away from being so invested of the emotional response of yikes, things are not going well, and oh my gosh, bring out the big behavior code red, whatever we want to call it, kind of moments or whatever. And one of the things that you and I talked about is in the Take 5 book that many of you already know about, we have lots of movement and sensory strategies that we included that have that heavy work component, so they're going to help to those kids to be able to be in a good place to set them up for learning, and we really learned so much from our teachers, and you'll see that's the dedication in that book, is for our teachers who set up learning centers and stations in their classrooms, and these were things that can easily be incorporated into that. So check out the Take 5 book that way. And then there's also lots of teachers who just their style, it's going to be so much better for them to do whole class breaks. And there's so many simple, easy things you can do that can become a fun part of the classroom culture, if you will, with that. So feel free to check that out. I wanted to mention the work of Harry Wong because you turned me on to a lot of his stuff. That shows that I'm a therapist and not an educator, that I didn't know so much about his work. But one of the great quotes that he had when we were thinking about the classroom management topic was, says that the number one problem in education is not discipline, it's the lack of procedures and routines, the lack of a plan that organizes a classroom for success. And we'll list his website. You can go learn more there. But you had some great thoughts on that for us, Barb. Go ahead and share.
Yeah, it's amazing the importance of procedures and routines. I'm always thinking proactive, preventive, and positive. And so
I like that.
Proactive, positive, and preventive. And I'll tell you, it's about perceptions, and for teachers who think that way, it really makes life way more fun in the classroom too. So one of those proactive, preventive, positive things is remembering the importance of procedures and routines. And one of my colleagues over the last many years used to say, a good rule of thumb, whenever you have movement in the classroom, have a procedure.
I love this. This is so great.
Seriously, it really works. And so, for instance, an example would be, let's take an older group of kids, a middle school group of kids. They have to turn their homework in every day. Well, have a procedure as to, do they turn it in at the beginning of class or the end of class? Do they put it in that wire basket by the door? Do they email, or whatever whatever it is? How do they do that? And then the other key, or for instance, elementary school, kids come in from lunch or recess and they want a drink of water. Okay, well, there's a time to get a drink of water, but if you don't have a procedure for it, then you're going to have mass chaos, and then you're going to have other problems, et cetera. So whenever there's movement in the classroom, have a procedure. Routines are really important for consistency in behavior, and as Sherry mentioned earlier, for our kiddos that have different kinds of special needs and challenges, routines can be make it or break it for them during the school day.
Absolutely.
So routines, do you come in the morning, put your stuff away, and then come sit in a certain place in the classroom for morning circle or a class meeting or something like that. But one of the keys about routines and procedures is you have to make sure, I'm laughing, but it's true, you have to make sure that you teach. Let me say that again. You have to make sure that you teach.
It's a concept.
The procedure or the routine to the students.
Right.
Because it doesn't necessarily work just to say, oh, we're going to do it this way. No, you need, like any other teaching, you instruct and you teach and you guided practice and you practice and you assess how it's going, et cetera. So, sometimes after vacation time, kids come back from being gone for 2 weeks or whatever, you may have to reteach a procedure, but that's okay. It will help maintain your sanity. And I would say same thing for parents in the home, too.
Absolutely.
If your kids need that kind of structure and routine, then same thing. The teaching may look a little different, but it's the same concept. You're going to teach, and the other part of teaching, if you really want it to work, is you've got to provide some sort of positive reinforcement. And that does not have to be tangible. It could just be simply, wow, guys, you did a great job at that today, or wow, 4 days out of 5 this week, man, you guys turned in your homework at the right place, and thank you so much. Or if it's a parent with their own child, a hug after they get their things put away in the right place, or whatever it may be.
Right. All the good stuff that makes life so rich and wonderful in our relationships is so important.
Even a thank you can work, or a smile can be a reinforcement.
Absolutely, and I think the cool thing about this idea with the procedures is that oftentimes so many of our kids, we think it's a special needs accommodation that we're doing, and I know you talk about this all the time for the special needs student, but that we may be concentrating on. But these things are a huge benefit for all
the students.
That's right. That's right. And nothing good ever happens when you have a line of 25 kids at a water fountain.
No,
so let's
it
just
takes
say
forever. And then it's all that instruction time.
That's right.
And on and on and on. So you want to prevent that, because that's what causes you to get exhausted.
Exactly. And we really shouldn't be surprised at that moment that things haven't gone well.
Exactly. It's like, oh goodness, what did I forget? Okay.
Great. Well, another area that when we were talking, I got really jazzed about with our conversation was this concept that you taught me about match and mismatch, and some of that you learned from Judy Wood, and a lot that you've done on your own in terms of teaching and giving people information about that. We'll reference 2 of Judy's books on your sheet, the Teaching Students in Inclusive Settings and another book, Mainstreaming, A Practical Approach for Teachers, both really nice resources that you steered people to quite a bit.
And I use those in my college courses a lot. So actually, although you'll find this idea referenced in lots of different places, but the place I first learned it was at a Council for Exceptional Children, actually, conference up in Denver many years ago.
Okay.
And I heard Judy Wood speak. I didn't have any idea who she was at that time. It was before she had written some of the books she's written, but she talked about the idea of match and mismatch, and to me it was like one of the most powerful concepts and it's simple. So basically what it is say as a classroom teacher, I've given some instructions, and I think I've been pretty clear about telling my kids what I want to have happen, what they need to do, et cetera. And most of them go about doing it okay, and then there's there are one or two students, and it's like they're not doing what I thought I just told them to do. And so instead of blaming and getting to a negative space about, oh my gosh, students aren't doing it, they never do it, da-da-da-da-da, look at it as, there's a mismatch here.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what I thought was going to happen. It's not happening. And we start looking for where's the mismatch, because the goal is to make a match. So if things aren't going the way you thought they were, think about, okay, where's the mismatch? Go back to the framework. Is there something I need to do with respect to the physical, cognitive, social, emotional, or sensory environment to make a match? So it could be something, it's not simple, but it's simple as far as fixing it, is a student, and I've given them independent work, and they're not doing it. They're up and about. They're bugging somebody else.
Oh, no one has ever experienced this.
Oh, never. They're talking. They're blurting out. It depends on how much attention they want or how much avoidance they want to do. And when I go back and I look to go, okay, we got a mismatch happening. What's it about? It may be that this is a student who the level of independent work I gave the student is too hard for them. It's really not at their independent level.
Mm-hmm.
And so what do? Well, they may act out. So there was a mismatch in the cognitive. Sensory mismatches, I think, happen a lot, and that's what we're becoming better at as educators, to learn how to deal with. I had a student one time. I loved this kid. He was great. And when it came to independent work time, there was no way, however, that he could sit in his seat.
It was not a happening deal.
Oh, not at all. And so I didn't care, so we got him a taller desk, and he stood. And he would always start off independent work time with some sort of a munchie, some sort of a small, crunchy sort of thing.
Okay.
And that really helped him.
Wow,
and
great.
The other kids had like a work snack, so to speak. These were fourth graders. But, you certainly do it with any age kid. And, and kids who needed the snack, they'd eat it. But if they didn't need it, they'd just sit on their desk. This kid needed it.
Right.
And he was great. He was fine. He was one of my favorite all-time students. But it was a sensory environment issue for him in order to make a match so he could get his independent work done.
And the cool thing there is it's not that he wasn't capable of independent work. We had to set him up enough so he could.
Totally capable, but his body wasn't capable of doing it the way everybody else was, for instance. That kind of thing. So anytime things aren't going the way you expected them to, think of it as a mismatch, and your job as a parent or professional or therapist is to figure out how can I make this into a match so that this kid could be successful.
I love that, because that's our parents, our professional reasoning, it kicks in, and we get out of the emotion of kind of thing. We're going to talk about another concept that you did enlighten me about, and how you explain so well to lots of teachers and parents. It's kind of that concept of fair and equal in the classroom, and it piggybacks right on what you were talking about.
So fair and equal, basically, in the English language, most of us will use the word fair and equal interchangeably, but they're really two different things. Equal means we all do exactly the same thing, we get the same thing, we do the same work, we get the same snack, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. Fair means that the individual gets what they need to be successful. Keyword being individual and need and successful. I should say keyword.
Awesome. That's okay.
So every kid doesn't have to do everything the same way. Just like if you're a parent, all your children don't do the same things the same way all the time. So really, don't be afraid to be fair. Being equal is kind of easy, actually, because we do the same thing for everybody. But we really need to pay attention to being fair to kids, because our needs are different. Mm-hmm. And providing them with what they need to be able to do what we're asking them to do. So sometimes we have to change how we ask kids to do work, or what we ask them to do, or whatever it may be. And that also may be that you're looking at those 4 areas again and going, okay, I may have to do something differently for this child, which isn't exactly the same as the others, because that's how I'm going to make a match out of a mismatch.
Oh, awesome. So just really combining those concepts and really looking at it. I mean, we're supposed to be individualizing. We're supposed to be knowing that we all have our strengths and supporting each other to be able to do them in that way.
Exactly.
Well, we're winding down time-wise. I want to take one question that we had submitted. It was a teacher question, and the teacher asks, Barb, how do I gather info, the kind of info that my teacher support person would need to help me with a child in my classroom who's really getting into trouble a lot? So it's like, what would you want to know when you came in to help them in light of all that you've talked with us about here?
So that's worth another few hours, but
exactly.
in a minute. So basically, we want to know about how often does it happen? Does it happen at certain times of the day?
Cool.
Does it happen after certain events of the day? You'll hear the words antecedent, behavior, and consequence. What happens right after the behavior? So basically, look at frequency. Does the behavior exist for a long time? When does it happen? I want to know, and is there a pattern? You're looking for what's the pattern?
Right. And I know we asked you to put you on the spot with that, but coming back to the things you talked about, like if we can step back and do some of that work of that observation and detective piece ahead of time before when we have someone come in and you can say, I'm noticing matches and mismatches here. I'm noticing that I need to do the fair thing, but I don't know how to do it. And do you have some suggestions for me? I think those are the things that as teacher consultants you guys are so great on, and as OTs we really groove on that. We love to look at that, what can we do and how can we help that teacher to set it up, because we're all doing that observing all the time. It comes so naturally to us, and we have to remember to tell people out loud all the good work that we do that way. So all righty, we're kind of winding down. I want to just make sure to remind us that hopefully you've heard things that helped to keep it simple for you in how you're looking at classroom management, and certainly that you have some ways that you can set your individuals up for success. Those of you as parents kind of even knowing a little more about how to dialogue with some of our teachers and our therapists when you're thinking about your individual. You know them the best oftentimes, and yet you're the person that's kind of coming in and saying, I know this isn't going well, but I have these ideas. So if we get some of that common understanding of how we might start to think of it or go about it, hopefully that helps us. And then I'll just do our common sense disclaimer here. The call is intended to provide suggestions and support for those of you that live and work with folks with self-regulation challenges. And of course, as the responsible adults, you want to use common sense when you're supporting others. If you've heard something here that you're unsure of, you don't think is a match for you, speaking of match and mismatch,
there you go.
Trust your judgment. Don't do it. Get some help from trained professionals like our wonderful teacher consultants, like therapists in your area. We also offer some support on the website. You can book some time if that's something that'll work for you. So this was fantastic, Barb.
Well,
Thank you
I'm very
so
happy to
much.
be part of it. Thank
That's
you.
right, and
Thank you.
you can hear her say she could take hours, so I'm asking her back again, folks. But
that would be fun.
We'll look forward to it, and Ron's gonna cue up some song and play out. Feel free to hang up whenever you're done here.